This is the final sermon in our series, Inside Out, How Are You Feeling? We have considered a range of emotions which we might feel inside: love, fear, anger and sadness, and we've thought about how they might be expressed. Now let's think about the emotion which might be expressed in our smiles, giggles and laughter: joy. What gives you joy? Is it something you've achieved or created? Is it something you really enjoy, such as art, music, sport, theatre, film, craft, a favourite TV programme? Is it something that makes you feel appreciated? Perhaps receiving a gift on Mother's Day, or giving a gift to somebody else gives you great joy. Is it helping others, volunteering? Or is your joy found in the natural world, seen in the promise of new life this spring? It gives me great comfort to see the new flowers coming out and the sense of God's faithfulness throughout the seasons. The writer of Lamentations expressed it like this from chapter 3. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. In my house, I have a plaque. Bless this house with friends and laughter. I've lived in my home in Harpenden since August 2020. So far, I am grateful for the blessing of friends and family connecting with me via Zoom and telephone. But I long for, I hope for, I dream for the time when I can open up my home to guests. When I think back, some of the happiest times in my lives have been the parties held in my home. Children's birthday parties, 30th, 40th and 50th birthday parties, wedding anniversary parties, housewarming parties, Christmas parties, summer afternoon teas. At these occasions the food was sumptuous. I had fun decorating the house with bunting and balloons. I loved creating a favourite playlist of music and enjoyed my friends' quizzes and delighted in presents. But what gave me the most joy was people. It gave me such joy bringing people together to celebrate the good times of life. My home was blessed with the laughter of friends and family. In the Bible, in Luke chapter 15, Jesus told stories about losing things such as sheep and coins and people's joy in finding them again. He also told a slightly longer story about a family in which a son made a mistake, but there was joy when he was reconciled with his father. I particularly like this story because the inner joy that the family members felt, and probably his mum too, was expressed outwardly in a party. Give me joy. In the story, the younger son wanted life, wanted happiness, and wanted his joy, and he wanted it now. To the first century audience, listening to Jesus' story, this young man's behaviour was shocking and shameful. Asking for his share of the inheritance was like saying to his father, I wish you were dead. I don't want any obligation to care for you. Asking for his share of the inheritance was like saying to the community, I don't care about what impact this will have on you. To give him his inheritance, the father divided his land in two. Thus the father, his eldest son, and their households were left with only half of the land. Only half of the land to build their economic prosperity on. They must have been devastated and felt a whole range of negative emotions. The son is described later as being dead to the father. The youngest son sold his half of the land and with the money left home to explore a distant country. In his newfound freedom without responsibilities, he sought a quick fix happiness. And for a while, he found joy in what the story described as dissolute living. We can only imagine what that was. Eventually, the younger son's money ran out. Far from home, in a country suffering a famine, he sank to an all-time low. To Jesus' Jewish audience, his actions were repulsive because he then violated religious purity codes. He fed pigs, animals that they thought were unclean. At this point, when all joy is gone, he came to his senses. He decided to go home, admit his mistakes, and ask his father to be employed on the farm. Give me joy. So what about us? Do we look for the quick fix solution? Do we desire joy in freedom from responsibility? Do we make decisions to please ourselves but know they come at another's expense? Give me joy now. Does instant gratification work and soothe our souls long term? Or is there another way? Do we sense God's invitation to find deeper joy? God invites all of us to take a reality check and think about our lives. Maybe deep down, if we are honest, we long for something deeper. We long for a deeper, lasting happiness. We long for a joy that is based on something other than satisfying our own needs. We long to find joy in knowing our mistakes are forgiven and we're welcomed home. Welcome home. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Now that was a welcome home. Now that was a joy-filled reunion. Now that was a joy-filled moment of family reconciliation. Now that was a moment of grace and unconditional love. According to the cultural traditions, the father should not have responded to the returning son with a loving embrace. But he did. According to the cultural traditions, the father should not have ran out to greet his son. But he did. According to the cultural traditions, the son was no longer worthy to be reinstated in the family. But he was. Jesus portrayed an image of a compassionate, loving, forgiving father. Jesus portrayed an image of a father who, after all the pain, now experienced deep joy at his son's homecoming. Jesus portrayed an image of how broken relationships can be restored. Jesus portrayed an image of people who celebrate because they found each other again. Jesus portrayed an image of deep joy, discovered after much pain. Through this story, Jesus tried to show people what God's love for humankind is like, how there is deep joy when we turn to God. In my childhood, the radio was on a lot in my house. My parents were always singing refrains from songs that they heard. And I distinctly remember my dad singing a Peters and Lee song, and the words go like this: "Welcome home, welcome. Come on in and close the door. You've been gone too long. Welcome, you're home once more." I liked the imagery it portrayed of welcome, even if people have been away a long time. God has no time limits. We are welcomed anytime by God, and God is searching for us. God's welcome for us is wholehearted, and we're invited to feel at home, accepted for who we are, invited to be all we can be, loved unconditionally. So if you're searching, longing for a deeper sense of inner joy, I pray that you'll have the courage to get on the road to God. And as you make your first steps, you will find God running towards you and welcoming you. And that is something worth celebrating. So let's party. Let's party. The father seized the moment, and quickly he ordered his slaves to start the party. New clothes were found for the son, the family ring symbolically placed on his finger. Food was cooked and there was music and dancing. The joy was so great that it spilled out to the whole community. Let's party! The son who was lost is found again. But there's always one party pooper. The older son didn't want to join in, deprived himself of the joy. Instead of joy, he was angry and jealous and sulked. Now, we may feel tempted to feel sorry for him. I mean, after all, he'd looked after the farm and the household whilst his younger brother had been away. However, this older son failed to follow cultural expectations. His refusal to join the party shamed his father. His public argument in front of the household with his father showed disrespect. He made allegations about what his brother had done exactly in his period of dissolute living, and he's not even met him yet. Just as the father ran out to the younger son, the father equally goes out to the older son. The father reassured them of the bond of their mutual relationship. Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. The father invited the older son not to focus on himself, but to celebrate his brother's return, to find deep joy in a restored relationship. And did he join in the party after his conversation with his father? Frustratingly, the story ends there. We don't know. But it does prompt us to think, what would we have done? Would we have sulked? Deprived ourselves of joy? Or perhaps after the conversation with our father, just let it go and join in, and don't miss the moment, the joy-filled moment, and join in the party. Let's party. God invites us to celebrate when we make a decision to find meaning and purpose in life by following Jesus. God invites us to celebrate when we hear other people's stories of how their lives as Christians has transformed them. God invites us to celebrate whether we've been a Christian for 5 minutes or 80 plus years. God invites us to party together because together we can encourage each other and grow in deep, lasting joy. A deep, lasting joy built on being loved by God and loving other people. At this moment, we are connected together as a Christian community, online, through newsletters, DVDs, phone calls, and prayers. And I'm so grateful for all the people who make this happen. If we're honest, it is really painful being apart from the people we long to be with. But in doing this during this pandemic, we show our depth of love and respect for our neighbour through our actions of self-restraint to keep others safe. It means patiently waiting, especially in the coming months, until the time is right for us to be together again. It means looking forward in hope to joy-filled reunions, to a future time when we can welcome people in our homes and our church building. The joy of reuniting with people again will be all the more poignant and powerful because we have suffered and lived through this difficult pandemic crisis. It will be a joy that is deep because we have recognised that life is so precious, people are so precious and worth all the sacrifices that we have made. And finally, as a Christian community, let us keep discovering God's joy through listening to each other's stories and being sensitive to one another. As Paul reminded the early community as he wrote to the Philippians, "Make my joy complete. Be of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourselves. Let each of you look not to your own interests, but to the interests of others." Let us pray. Loving God, please make your joy complete in me. Please make your joy complete in our church community. Help me to be wholehearted in the way I relate to you, my household, my family, my friends and church community. Please guide my thinking, words and actions. Help me to follow your way of unconditional, compassionate, forgiving love. Make your joy complete in me. Amen.